My name is Ryan Evans. You know me as the editor-in-chief of War on the Rocks, but I'm also publisher of a new journal produced with the University of Texas called the Texas National Security Review, which you can read at tnsr.org. This is Horns of a Dilemma, the podcast partner to that journal, which features the thinkers and leaders resident at the various institutions of the University of Texas and those who stop in to share their wisdom. On the latest episode of Horns of a Dilemma, we have Amy Zegart, who is hosted at UT as a part of the Strauss Center's Brumley Speaker Series. You should know who Amy is already, but if you don't, she's the co-director of the Stanford Center for International Security and Cooperation and the Davies Family Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution. To call this a talk about cybersecurity would be accurate, but it wouldn't do this wide-ranging and fascinating episode justice. Enjoy.
What I want to talk about today is the changing cyber landscape. Now, some of you know, and some of this probably some of you don't know. So I want to try to level the playing field a little bit, and then I'm going to toss the really hard technical questions to Admiral Inman. What I want to do is put all of the current events, and they're changing very quickly, into some context. So this is my What a Difference a Decade Makes slide. If you look on the far left of this slide, this is a smiling Robert Mueller and John Negroponte, then the Director of National Intelligence, and the FBI director. They are giving their annual threat assessment to Congress, and I think the reason they're smiling is that the threat assessment in 2007, just a little over 10 years ago, does not mention the word cyber once, right? So this is the last serious threat assessment where there's not one word devoted to cyber, right? If you fast forward 5 years to 2012, you have then Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta talking about a very different cyber threat. So all of a sudden in 2012, cyber now vaults to the top 3 threats listed in the annual threat assessment that the DNI is giving to Congress. And Secretary Panetta very deliberately goes on board the USS Intrepid, the aircraft carrier museum, and warns of a cyber Pearl Harbor. So there he's really talking about the possibility that a cyber attack could have physical consequences, could take down critical infrastructure. He talks about disabling the power grid, the financial system, transportation networks, the ability of cyber attacks to lead to contaminated water supplies, and creating crisis and damage akin to September 11th and the terrorist attacks on that day. So that's from 2007 to 2012. Fast forward another 5 years, and we get James Clapper, the intelligence assessment that finds Russian election interference and influence operations. As many of you know, in January of 2017, Director Clapper revealed or declassified that the CIA, the National Security Agency, and the FBI all agreed with high confidence, right, those are important words, that the Putin regime directly ordered a multifaceted campaign to undermine public faith in the U.S. democratic process and to influence the outcome of the 2016 presidential election. Now, of course, this story is still ongoing. And in November, if you haven't seen it, you should tune in. The Senate Select Committee on Intelligence held an extraordinary hearing where the general counsels of Twitter and Facebook and Google were all appearing. Not their CEOs, but their general counsels. And of course, it was revealed that the extent of election influence operations was even larger than those companies had known or publicly acknowledged. Just to give you some sense of that, Twitter testified that they found 2,700 accounts controlled by the Russians and 36,000 suspected Russian bots, accounts that automatically generated more than 1 million election-related tweets that received 288 million impressions during the final 10 weeks of the presidential election. Now, Google's general counsel testified that Google had discovered Russian agents had uploaded more than 1,000 YouTube videos about divisive social issues like gun control, Black Lives Matter, and the like. And then, of course, Facebook revealed that Kremlin-instigated content, whether by Facebook groups or purchased ads, had reached an estimated 126 million Americans. That's more than a third of our population. But of course, the story is still unfolding. And now, of course, we know more recently that Cambridge Analytica, a political consulting firm linked to the 2016 Trump campaign, took advantage of Facebook's lax data privacy rules for app developers and used a questionnaire that was clicked on by 270,000 users to access the data of 50 million of their Facebook friends. Right? So this is lots of questions about the connections of Cambridge Analytica to the Trump campaign, lots of questions about the extent to which this use of personal information from 50 million Facebook friends violated Facebook rules. When did it violate? What the legal implications are. But of course, this is a very different world than anyone could have imagined in 2007, or even than Secretary Panetta imagined in 2012. This is a fast-changing threat landscape. It's changing at speeds that are really unprecedented in American history. So if we think about 10 years throughout the Cold War, that was one former intelligence official put it to me, God love the Soviets, everything was on a 5-year plan, right? So it was bureaucracies collecting against bureaucracies. This is a much different, much faster moving threat. What exactly is the cyber threat? Lots of discussion, right? We read the media reports and you hear it's everything from Cheeto-eating teen hackers to the government of North Korea. This is one of my favorites. This is Mafia Boy. For those of you who don't know the story, Mafia Boy was responsible for a series of cyber attacks in 2000 that disabled a number of websites in Northern California, including Yahoo, which tells you how long ago it was because they were the top search engine in the world when they were attacked, CNN and some other sites. The FBI investigates, and when they finally find the perp, Mafia Boy, he turns out to be a 15-year-old teen who was caught when he was spending the night with his friends and watching the movie Goodfellas. But you can't make this stuff up. Right? So yes, there are teen hackers, and there are lots of stories about how worried should we be about these types of threats. But we also have non-state actors like Anonymous that hack for a variety of reasons, sometimes just to showcase their skills, sometimes just because they can, sometimes for ideological reasons. And then we also have, of course, criminals, and we have state actors as well. And I call them the big four, right? China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, with very sophisticated cyber capabilities. So one of the challenges of making sense of the cyber threat landscape is that the terms themselves are analytically murky. They're confusing. What does cyber mean, right? Essentially, it's putting together any kind of an event by the transmission mechanism. So it occurs over digital networks or platforms. So imagine if I said to you that we should be very concerned about a new class of threats called vehicle-borne threats. And the category vehicle-borne threats includes everything from terrorists exploding truck bombs to invasions with tanks to carjackings, right? Now, you'd look at me like I was crazy because these things have nothing to do with one another, but they all occur by vehicles. That is the same analytic mistake we've made with cyber. We lump all sorts of things together, the theft of your credit card information at Target, the breach of your personal data at the Office of Personnel Management, North Korea's attack on Sony Pictures Entertainment, and massive theft of intellectual property and potential sabotage of American military weapons systems, all lumped together by this word we call cyber. And so it's hard to actually make priorities when you have such a disparate set of activities lumped analytically in the same category. The word attack is also very problematic. If someone steals your credit card in a store, you don't say you've had a robbery attack. If someone commits espionage and takes a document out of a prime minister's safe, you don't say that's an espionage attack. Right? It's theft and espionage. But in cyberspace, we call these things attacks. And the word attack connotes that the government should do something about it, right? Words matter because they set public expectations about what governments should do, and they also set thresholds of particular government actions, authorities that come into play when you label something in a certain way. So our language, this is not just a professor being picky here, right? Our language really matters in obscuring or illuminating the sort of scope of the cyber threat landscape. So I'm going to vastly oversimplify what is a complicated landscape and suggest that there really are 5 different types of cyber threats, right? It's stealing, spying, disrupting, destroying, and deceiving. And I'll spend more time on that in a minute. So theft is a pretty straightforward one. In 2014, CSIS estimated the global cost of cyber theft of intellectual property and crime to be about $575 billion. That's equivalent to the GDP of Sweden. More recent estimates suggest that globally, cyber crime is now more profitable than the illicit drug trade. We're talking big business with cyber theft. Spying also is fairly straightforward, talked about a lot in the press. Of course, I know many of us in this room were victims of the OPM breach, which is largely believed to have been attributed to China. The theft of more than 22 million highly classified records, including security clearance forms from the Office of Personnel Management, right? So this is just one of many examples of cyber espionage. Now, of course, our cyber landscape also makes insider threats far more damaging in scale and speed than they have historically been also. So if we think about comparing over time what one malicious insider can do, one of the most notorious counterintelligence examples of a traitor is, of course, Robert Hanssen. Robert Hanssen worked at the FBI for many years, had a very senior job in counterintelligence at the FBI, but he betrayed his country and was caught eventually passing secrets first to the Soviets and then to the Russians over a period of more than 20 years. Now, he did this and passed along documents, several thousand documents in the old-fashioned way, literally in dead drops underneath a Virginia bridge, right? But it took Hanssen years and years, right, to be able to take out a few thousand documents and pass them to adversaries. Compare Robert Hanssen to Edward Snowden, contractor for the NSA, who is estimated to have passed along or made public 1.5 million documents in a matter of months. Speed and scale for espionage, including insider threats, that is really unprecedented in modern times. Disruption is what Leon Panetta was talking about, Cyber Pearl Harbor. We still read a lot about the vulnerability of electric power grids. Recent news reports that the Russians have actually been infiltrating our electrical grid system as well. Real concerns about disruption of systems and critical infrastructure, most of which is owned and operated by the private sector. Fourth is destruction. And here I categorize disabling military systems in times of conflict. I can tell you that one cabinet official came to Stanford about a year and a half ago and said that they were concerned that they didn't know which systems, major weapons platforms they had, were most vulnerable and which weren't. Right? That's pretty disturbing. When we think about the move to digital systems in our weapons systems, in the same way that your car is mostly a driving computer, the F-35 is mostly a flying computer, think about the cyber vulnerabilities of our weapons systems. And we also know from news accounts in the past year or so that there appears to be a lot of at least testing about things like GPS spoofing. So there's some speculation that the Russians were behind the GPS spoofing of some merchant ships. So the ships believed they were using GPS to go in a certain direction, and the GPS looked like it was all working fine, only the ships didn't go where they were expected to go, right? So interfering with GPS guidance of ships is certainly a development that we should be concerned about. So destruction or disruption of military capabilities in times of conflict is a growing concern for cybersecurity. And then finally, of course, there's the deception operation. And I have a lot more to say about that, so I'll come back to that one in a minute. Let me take a little bit of time to talk about the three ways in which cybersecurity threats are fundamentally different than other national security threats that the United States has confronted. Now, there are lots of ways in which they're different, but I want to focus on the three most important ways that give the most heartburn, I think, to policymakers and academics trying to understand how we can advance policy interests. The first is that in cyber, the United States is both the most powerful country in cyberspace and the most vulnerable country in cyberspace at the same time. Now, the military likes to talk about domains. I am very fortunate. I run the War College Fellows program at the Hoover Institution. So we get these wonderful fellows from every service that come to Stanford for a year. And so my military fellows often like to talk about domains. There's the air domain, the sea domain, the land domain. And those with the most capabilities in those traditional domains are considered the most powerful. You have the most aircraft carriers, you have the quietest submarines, you have the most advanced aircraft platforms. You're considered the most powerful in that domain. But that's not true in cyberspace. Why isn't it true? Because we are more digitally connected here in the United States than any other country in the world. We rely on digital systems for our military, for our commerce, for our education, right? For our social interaction, for our civil society. We are so vulnerable because we are so connected. Now, when North Korea hacked Sony Pictures, it became a national security incident that involved the highest levels of the United States government. But when North Korea's internet went down in an attack that was reportedly conducted by the United States, not a whole lot happened. Why? Because at the time, North Korea had a whopping total of 28 websites. Shutting down the internet in one of the world's least connected countries, one of the world's poorest countries, where only 10% of the population owns a cell phone, and they use cell phones at night for electricity because the power delivery is so uncertain. Shutting down the internet in what could have been a reciprocal event didn't do much. We are asymmetrically vulnerable to cyber attacks. At the same time, we're the most powerful actor in cyberspace. That's different compared to other national security threats. So that's difference number one. Difference number two, the government can't go it alone. So in most national security threats, there's cooperation that has to happen with the private sector, but not nearly to the degree that it's required for cyber threats. Now, in every other realm, the government is considered, this is where I'm going to get a little political sciencey on you, the government is considered the legitimate monopoly provider of security, right? Legitimate monopoly provider. So if you think about, if you're worried about crime in your neighborhood, you call the police. The police are the legitimate monopoly provider of security to protect you in your neighborhood. If we're worried about military threats to our interests or to our safety at a national level, we call the military, right? It's the legitimate monopoly provider of security. But that's not true in cyberspace either, because 85% of our critical infrastructure is owned and operated by the private sector. Whose job is it to protect .com or .edu? It's not the Pentagon's job to protect those domain names. Whose job is it? So we have to have the cooperation of the tech industry and critical infrastructure firms in order to increase cybersecurity at a national level. And yet, as we talked about a little bit this morning, that trust between industry, particularly in Silicon Valley where I live, and the US government is really problematic. It's after the 1-2 punch of the Snowden revelations, of NSA activities, and the Apple FBI debate. One of the initiatives that I've been running at Stanford with my cyber partner in crime, Herb Lynn, is what we call a project to bridge the suit hoodie divide. So we often talk about track 2 efforts between the United States and foreign governments that are quiet, non-official, but connected to official discussions about, say, nuclear risk between the U.S. and Russia or the U.S. and China. Well, we believe that we need a track 2 between the suits and the hoodies, right, between Silicon Valley and Washington, D.C. And I will say, when Ash Carter came to Stanford to unveil the Pentagon cybersecurity strategy, I did give him a hoodie that said Stanford on it to help him with his translational efforts. So there is this trust deficit in the wake of Snowden and the Apple FBI case. And we're doing what we can behind the scenes to bring people together to try to repair that trust deficit. I want to share 2 anecdotes that just give you an idea of how serious this deficit is. So a few years ago, we created a cyber boot camp at Stanford, and Bobby's been one of our all-star faculty for the boot camp. And so our first one, we had congressional staffers, Republicans and Democrats, House and Senate, all the relevant oversight committees. And we brought them out and wanted them to have informal, off-the-record discussions with tech leaders as part of this cyber education. So we went to a major tech company whose name you would well recognize, and one of the senior executives there said out loud to these congressional staffers, "I consider the National Security Agency to be the same as the People's Liberation Army. They are both attacking my networks all the time, and I have to defend my customers against the US government as much as I have to defend them against China." Wow. So jaws dropped and cell phones started dialing back to Washington about how much work needed to happen to repair that trust. So this is the kind of comment that you won't get necessarily in a congressional hearing or in a formal meeting, but you will get if you create the right conditions for people to talk candidly. It scared the pants off of some of our congressional staffers. Let me share one other anecdote. In the midst of the Apple FBI controversy, we brought out some senior Justice Department officials to meet with tech leaders. And one of the tech leaders said, this is before we even sat down, to the Justice Department folks, "So are you going to serve me papers before they serve us our salad?" So I kind of hit him on the shoulder and said, at least wait till dessert before you really dig into the Justice Department folks. The point is that this is a very, very serious breach of trust. And as I said this morning, the perhaps one silver lining on Facebook's current troubles is that there's a renewed understanding, and you can feel it in the Valley already, that these social media platforms are being used for nefarious purposes by foreign actors. And the US government doesn't look so bad anymore. So that may be changing. So the government can't go it alone. Big difference number 2. How to figure out that collaboration piece between, in particular, tech industry leaders and the US government is a critical challenge moving forward. And that's different than other national security threats. Third big difference, the attack surface. In cyberspace, the attack surface is huge, and it's getting bigger all the time. As you know, the good guys and bad guys on the internet are all connected. There are no safe places. There are no safe communities. You can't put walls or locks or fences to keep the good guys and the bad guys apart. We're all out there together in cyberspace. The internet wasn't designed to be secure. It was designed to be open and convenient. And it was originally designed so a handful of researchers, the first message between UCLA and Stanford, could share information with each other. They already knew each other, and they trusted each other. Except today, by my latest count, 48% of the world is on the internet, right? And that's growing every day. Thanks to the Internet of Things and all those wonderful devices that we can use to navigate or adjust our thermostat, or remind us of what we need to buy, or our Fitbits, right? Thanks to the Internet of Things, there are more internet-connected devices today than human beings on the planet. And by 2020, more people will have cell phones than running water or electricity. So connectivity is here to stay. We're not going to go backwards when it comes to connectivity. So this Internet of Things and connectivity can be wonderful, but the dark side of connectivity is vulnerability. Anything that's smart is vulnerable. Anything. So there's always a weakness that nobody's ever heard of. So Bobby's heard me say this before, but technologists often use a rule of thumb in code that for every 2,500 lines of code, there's usually one inherent vulnerability, a weakness that the coder didn't think about, right? It's not maliciously put in the code. It's just nobody really thought about it. You don't get rewarded for making good code, right? So one for every 2,500 lines. Maybe it's 1,000, maybe it's 2,000, but you get the order of magnitude. So now imagine that all these nefarious cyber actors out there, the non-state actors, the teens of eating Cheetos, the state-based actors, non-state terrorist groups, they're all out there penetrating, trying to test those vulnerabilities. So if you imagine that code is a chain link fence, and there's one weak or missing link every 2,500 links, and now these bad guys are out there searching constantly for that missing link. I always say they're like the velociraptors in Jurassic Park. Remember them? Constantly testing to see how they can get through. That's the world in which we live. And now think about all the lines of code that power the devices we all love so much. So my Android phone runs on 12 million lines of code. That's nearly 5,000 vulnerabilities inherent just sitting there in the code, if the math is roughly right. Windows operating system, 40 million lines of code. So when you get those messages to patch on Tuesday, because as computer security people will tell you, Patch Tuesday is followed by Exploit Wednesday. So all of our fancy devices are run on code. And we think about consumer products that are now connected to the internet. We'd rather be connected than protected. My favorite example of connected versus protected is Hello Barbie. Hello Barbie came out a couple years ago. Hello Barbie has a belt buckle that you can push, and she will engage in conversation with your child. She will remember what your child says, so because of the use of AI. And by the way, your child's voice is stored in the cloud. And so Hello Barbie will say, hello, Bobby. Is your brother still bothering you? Right? Because it makes for a more pleasant or interaction with your child. What could possibly go wrong, right, with a device like this in the hands of a child using artificial intelligence storing your child's voice in the cloud? So you can imagine someone having a Hello Barbie that says, is your mom home? What's your credit card PIN number? Right? This is Hello Barbie. So we'd rather be connected than protected. And then, of course, as we all know, we are the weakest links. Humans are always the weakest links when it comes to cybersecurity. I will share just two examples on this score. One is a few years ago, the Department of Homeland Security ran a test where it dumped a bunch of thumb drives in a parking lot of a classified facility to see what would happen. And of the people that picked up the thumb drive, so not everyone picked it up, but of the people that picked up the thumb drive, 60% of them put it into their classified computer, okay? Compromising potentially that machine. And if the thumb drive had a logo on it, didn't matter what the logo was, just any kind of official looking logo, the percentage was even higher. Just put that sucker right into their computer. A couple years ago, we had a cyber summit at Stanford where President Obama came. So this was a lot of leaders in the Valley came. You had to be heavily credentialed, a lot of security. You had to wear those big badges. And I'm sitting in the business school at a break, and I watched this. One of the VIPs, heavily credentialed person for the cyber summit, walked into the business school cafeteria and went up to a random person and said, my cell phone battery is dying. Would you mind if I plug it into your computer? And the business school student said, sure, go ahead. Plug the phone right into the computer at the Cybersecurity Summit, right? So humans are the weakest link in cybersecurity, and our attack surface is only getting larger. So let me turn to deception. Now you guys, when I first put this together a while ago, this wasn't as well known as it is now, but since it happened in Texas, I thought I'd include it. So this is about deception as the newest challenge. If we think about historically, during World War II and the Cold War, deception was primarily an elite level game where governments were trying to deceive other governments to gain advantage, whether it's decision advantage or diplomatic advantage or military advantage, right? So World War II, the invasion of Normandy was one of the greatest examples of successful deception, where the British basically compromised the entire German spy network and used it to relay fake information about Allied invasion plans to convince Hitler that the invasion would be at Calais instead of Normandy. Now, they went to, as you know, elaborate lengths to make this deception complete. There was a fictitious army group called the First United States Army Group, led by General Patton. They had dummy landing craft. They had inflatable items and fake storage depots. They had fake airfields. They even put fake tire tracks in the ground just in case there was reconnaissance by the Germans that might pierce this deception. The deception worked so well that even after the troops landed at Normandy, Hitler did not immediately send troops or reinforcements because he was convinced it was a diversion and that the real landing was still going to be at Pas-de-Calais. That is deception at an elite level, right? Leaders deceiving other leaders. Same thing in the Cold War. So, classic example there, the Cuban Missile Crisis, where Khrushchev really wanted to have a fait accompli and went to great lengths to hide the operation where he was building nuclear missile sites in Cuba. Now, the deception was so complete that Soviet ship crews were not even told where they were going originally until they reached the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So they're carrying the nuclear materials, and it's now been declassified that the protocol was they would travel to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. They were told they were going to a cold weather climate, so they packed all the wrong gear. In the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, the captain would unseal an envelope in the presence of a KGB officer. Now, inside that envelope were the instructions of the real coordinates in Cuba, with instructions at the end that said, after familiarizing yourself with the contents of this document, destroy it. Today is a different world. Now deception is not just aimed at leaders, it's aimed at all of us. Deception is reaching into the mass publics of foreign countries to try to deceive large swaths of the public, and that is new. So this is just one example that was revealed in those Senate hearings I talked about in November. This was Senator Richard Burr's Cuban Missile Crisis moment, where instead of Adlai Stevenson unveiling the giant posters of U-2 photos revealing missile sites in Cuba, Senator Burr revealed these giant posters about how the Russians were inciting conflict among the American people. So what this is there's two Facebook groups. One was called The Heart of Texas, which was not created by Texans. It was created by Russians in the Internet Research Agency. It soon grew into the most popular Texas secession page on Facebook. At one point in 2016, there were more followers of the Heart of Texas Facebook group than the official Texas Democrat and Republican Facebook pages combined. More than 250,000 followers. At the same time, the Internet Research Agency created the United Muslims of America, also had hundreds of thousands of followers, more than 300,000 followers. Not created by Muslims of America, created by Russians. Now, both of these groups decided that they were going to hold an event on the same day, at the same time, May 21st at 12 o'clock, at the same location in Houston. This is virtual deception creating real protests of real Americans in Houston, Texas, all instigated by the Kremlin. Right? This is deception on a mass scale. And now that's the good news. Okay? This is the bad news. Those are Stone Age tools compared to what's coming. So this is what originally got me interested in looking more deeply at artificial intelligence. NVIDIA is a company in Silicon Valley. In October, it released this report, a very influential technical report that showed that NVIDIA researchers could use advanced artificial intelligence and a technique called generative adversarial networks, or GAN, to create real-looking images of fake celebrities. These people do not exist, right? These images are created completely by machines. And what the researchers found was, with enough data of real celebrities, 30,000 images, the machines could learn how to make pictures that looked more realistic by including things like facial hair and jewelry. So the basic idea, I am not a technologist, I hasten to add that, so don't ask me much about how it really works, right? Admiral Inman will have to answer those questions. Is with GAN, you have two different neural networks competing against each other. One that creates an image and the other that's trying to detect whether that image is real or false. And so as they compete against each other, the images get better and better. And there's no way to unpack it to know what was authentic in the first place. So it's not as though there's some trademark where you can figure out what was fake and what wasn't. These are all completely fake images of celebrities, okay? Now, Bobby, of course, has written about a far sexier application of deception, quite literally, using AI-assisted fake porn, which is much more interesting than just celebrity images. It uses a similar idea, but much less sophisticated. Uses machine learning algorithms to splice somebody's face, could be you, could be your mom, could be a celebrity, on the video image of adult film actors or actresses. Now, unless you think this is an unlikely thing and it'd be really hard to get your face, think about all the selfies we post, including Cyber Barbecue. Like, we got to watch out for that. I don't want that to be in a bad film. Not Americans. People have uploaded, are you ready? 24 billion selfies in 1 year. So imagery about ourselves, because we love to take selfies and post it, is readily available for this kind of manipulation. My friends in computer science say that we're already really good at creating fake audio that sounds exactly like your voice and is indistinguishable from your voice. And now we're getting to a point where we will soon, estimates range within 2 years roughly, have fake video that is so realistic you won't actually be able to tell whether it's fake or real. So what I have here is a little clip I'm going to play by the University of Washington. There's a research team there that's doing a lot of work on using artificial intelligence and lip syncing to create fake video. But I want to just set the scene a little bit before I go to the video, which is that what you're going to see is a little clip of President Obama. And it's not as though they just spliced together different statements that he made at different times. What you're going to see is completely fabricated using artificial intelligence and lip syncing technology to make the image of him move as though he's actually speaking, okay? He didn't actually say these things, right? They're making him say these things. Right? So, and you're going to see a impersonator use his voice too.
The doors that have been open to me aren't open to them.
We can even create an Obama video from voice impressionists.
Here we go. President Barack Obama. When you giving a speech, make sure you use a lot of pauses and speak in a very weird timbre. Up and down and up, down, down.
We show an application that creates a short summary video from a longer speech by manually selecting the desired text to include. Note that the result is completely seamless. While our results were similar to Butholsis et al. From SIGGRAPH 2012, they required the original footage, and we do not.
Everybody,
They made up the footage.
today 20 million more American adults know the financial security of health insurance. On top of that, another 3 million more kids have coverage than when I took office. Most of us don't get our health care through the marketplace. We get it through our job or through Medicare or Medicaid. And what you should know is that you now have free preventive care. There are no more annual or lifetime limits on essential health care. Women can get free checkups.
So you get the idea. And if you look at the whole video, you'll see the evolution of the lip syncing AI technology so that it gets better and better over time. So what does this all mean? Let me give you 3 possible scenarios for the future, right? 3 examples of how we're going to be dealing with mass deception in the gray zone short of conflict. Imagine that there is video that the Iranian president, Rouhani, is discussing a clandestine nuclear program violating the Iran deal. It is fake, but there's no way to know it. Because at this point, remember, we can't reverse engineer this to figure out what's fake and what's not. So his denials cannot be believed. Imagine that there's surveillance video of a terrorist attack at a mall in Minnesota or in Michigan or in Maryland. And the terrorist attack is not real, but the surveillance video makes it look like it is absolutely real. Twitter goes viral with video of the suspected terrorist. A manhunt ensues. The suspected terrorist is not a terrorist at all, but a local Pakistani American college student. Right? Or imagine this. Fake videos show that U.S. troops are evacuating from South Korea. This prompts Kim Jong-un, who believes the United States is preparing for an attack, to launch a preemptive strike on Seoul or on Guam, triggering an escalation spiral into nuclear war. Now, if you think that this is far-fetched, consider this. In September of this year, fake evacuation orders for U.S. military and their dependents stationed in South Korea did happen. Okay? These fake evacuation orders were issued over mobile phones and social media amidst high tensions between the U.S. and North Korea after North Korea had just conducted its 6th nuclear test, and amidst the war of words between Kim Jong-un and President Trump, where President Trump declared that he was going to rain fire and fury on North Korea like the world had never seen. In the midst of this heightened tension, these fake evacuation orders go out to some U.S. military and their dependents in South Korea, and U.S. Forces Korea had to issue an alert saying that the order was fake and that there was no evacuation. Right? This is not nearly as far-fetched a scenario as you might believe. So at the end of the day, deception has always been a part of international relations. But the changing cyber threat landscape suggests that deception is going mass and deception is going big time in real time. And we are confronting a seriously different new world.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Horns of a Dilemma. Do not forget to check out the Texas National Security Review at tnsr.org.